Hey everyone, welcome back to Beekeeping with Natalie, or welcome to if you are new. Today we are in southeast Missouri with Corey Stevens, and we're just kind of doing a couple things, mostly queen stuff. That's what Corey basically focuses on the most.
Yep.
So if you kind of talk about how you got into beekeeping a little bit.
Yeah, my dad, my brother, I think had talked to a beekeeper, that the only one I know of that was getting rich beekeeping, and so they wanted to try it. And then they figured out that it was hot and it was a lot of work and that you get stung. And so they kind of lost interest in it. Mom said I should be an entomologist when I grow up. Anyway, long story short, I got in their colonies and I was hopelessly addicted after just digging through a beehive or two.
So
And still here.
yeah. So what's your main goal? Why are you doing beekeeping?
My main focus, I love queen rearing, first off. That's probably one of my passions. And then on top of that, I like to breed for VSH traits. That way our bees carry some level of mite resistance, and it seems like we just have far fewer problems if the mites are under control.
Yeah.
And so that's been our main focus lately.
So do you at all see in the future, in years, 10 years, that we won't be treating as much with these?
I think there's definitely a potential for it. I mean, I stopped treating 10 years ago or so just because I was breeding specifically for VSH, and I wanted to see how they did. I mean, I'm not a big apiary, we're maybe 150 hives, but we'll make a couple thousand queens a year. And so, I would call that sustainable, it's worth doing. So I think that if people start looking at VSH or other resistant traits, it'll definitely reduce our reliance on chemical miticides. Even if it doesn't completely do away with them, we're not relying on them so much.
Yeah.
So it's a huge win, I would say. Yeah.
So you sell queens. Is there any way for anybody watching that could buy them?
Sure. Like, you can check out our website, stevensbeeco.com. I've got a YouTube channel that's not quite as cool as Natalie's, but I've got some useful information on it under Stevens Beeco.
We'll leave those down below, probably in the comment section, if you want to check that out. And I think that's pretty much it. So we're going to do a couple things today and kind of go through a little bit on that, and yeah.
It'll be good.
All right, we're here with Corey Stevens, and we've got some virgin queens that we're going to catch some attendance for, and we'll kind of take you along for how Corey does that.
These just emerged this morning in the incubator. We put them in JZBZ candy cages, but they're probably good for in the incubator with just candy 24 to 48 hours or so, and then they'll start to kind of lose hope and die. So really, as soon as they're out, as soon as you can get in there, you need to add attendance. And then we ship these, all over the country. So they're pretty hardy once you get attendance in there. I know some people ship cells. This is a little bit more work than shipping cells, but they're super hardy, and if they miss delivery, they're usually still fine. Whereas cells, if they miss delivery, they're toast. So we'll catch some attendance. Okay, let's see here. Here's what I normally do. I just open up this hive. This is the one I've been pillaging for all my attendants. Make sure she's not on here.
So does it matter what hive you take attendance from?
Not really. I pretty much just pick one that's healthy. The main thing I look for is, like, on these brood frames, a lot of people want to grab nurse bees, But as soon as nurse bees come out, they're almost like nutritionally deficit because they're hungry kind of from development. But if you look on brood frames, you'll find some queens have just a thick abdomen. It's basically the ones that, for instance, like this one here, like I think they eat a whole bunch to feed the brood, and like they're less inclined to sting, and they don't really attack virgin queens either. Whereas if you're getting young bees, they're not as good, or if you're getting really old bees, they're not as good. So I usually go for those. See that one? See how big its butt is?
Yeah.
That's the ones I'm going for.
And why do you have to have attendance in there with the queen?
I think in nature, they normally just come out and immediately they're getting tended to or fed. And if they emerge, even if they have food, if there's no one there it's like I just say they lose hope and die. That's kind of how it is, really. But if you throw attendants in there, they get energized again, and then they'll last for a long time. Like I can keep them in the incubator a couple weeks even, but you got to water them every day, because if you don't water them, they'll die anyway. But this is my little crude setup here. I usually just sit on a cinder block or something. And like I said, I just target these little fat ones here, like this. And I usually do about 6. I think that was 6. And a lot of times she's kind of overwhelmed by it, but it'll keep her moving. You want to try one after this?
I can.
I think you should. The other thing is too, is like sometimes she'll try to run out, and you gotta watch not to like close her feet. See, she's trying to get out. Whenever you close the lid, that's one risk, is that you'll trap her foot or her leg in there. She keeps putting her leg up. There, okay, she's out of the way. There you go. And that's how they ship. And like I said, they'll keep even a couple weeks in the incubator, but water is a huge thing then. You want to try one? Yeah, just grab any one of those. And whenever I grab them, like if you find one that has a thick abdomen, if you almost like push it down a little bit, if you can get both wings, they almost can't even sting you.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll grab just one wing, but I usually try to get them in there quick, because sometimes they'll give you a dose of venom.
So, does it matter? How do you want me to?
Just use your judgment. See, that one's kind of fat, that one's kind of fat. Just pick the ones with the thicker abdomens. And the reason I say that is because they'll eat a lot, and then that'll get their hypopharyngeal glands going to where they can make royal jelly or make, brood food. And so that's why I'm picking these that are super fat like that. Because A, they're less likely to sting you, and B, they're so full of nectar, like they've got plenty of nutrition to share with the queen too.
Okay, so like, is this one good then?
Yeah, that's a good one. So you can even kind of push her down a little bit to where you can grab both of her wings. It takes a little practice. Yeah, perfect.
Do you put them head first? Or?
Yeah, I usually do, because some of them will try to back out, and I'll just put pressure on them to where they have to run in. Got a nurse. See, those are the ones I avoid, because I say they're nutritionally deficit. It's like they're hungry. They're not the ones feeding everybody. But a lot of people want to catch nurse bees and put them in. Those aren't really the best attendants. You kind of want to get the ones that are a little bit older than that are full of nectar and food. And you can shake bees on those too, which is a little bit easier. But you know how some people will divvy up orders and stuff, there's no substitute for having those attendants in there with her, because you can divvy them up or whatever. Or if the package gets damaged, like in transit, you don't have bees everywhere. That package can get mauled, and all the attendants are going to be inside the cages. Nice.
Thanks.
What'd you think?
It was fine.
And after you do thousands of them, it gets easier.
So after you put all these attendants in, will those queens be ready?
Yep.
And where are they going?
All over the
Okay.
continental U.S. It really varies. It seems like they're just all over the place. I'd have to look at the sheet to see where they're going. There's a few going to Missouri this week. Some going to Colorado. Some are going to Maine, which I don't know if I've shipped a lot of them to Maine before.
Do you get stung very often while doing this?
Not a ton, really. Occasionally. I've got a couple little dots on my...
Yeah.
fingers from getting stung, but a lot of times it's working hives and I accidentally
Yeah,
grab one, But overall, I mean, they're being pretty good. I've had some colonies, though, that I made crosses, like between a couple VSH lines or between, like, the Purdue biters and a VSH line, and it seems like the first cross, they're prone to being jerks. I don't know why, but it seems to be the case. Check this out, Natalie. You see all those cells where they've uncapped them, and some of them they've recapped. This is a high VSH colony, so you can see where they're. Some of them they leave opened up, and then some of them you can see their eyes kind of poking through, where they've recapped it. That's where they're looking for mites to see if there's any reproducing under there.
Yeah.
And then that's why we go through and VSH test in the spring, because you can measure which ones, like how much they shut down mite reproduction. And then we pick those as, like drone producing colonies. Mm-hmm. And then out of our breeder queens, like we can keep that concentrated pretty high. If you want to really go total nerd.
So is that what those queens should do?
Yeah.
Is that what this hive? Okay.
Yep. And it used to bother me because some people would call that bald brood, and it almost sounds like it's a brood disease, but it's just an uncapping trait. And some of them have part of it because it's several genes, to where some of them will uncap, but they're not high VSH, so they've got part of it, but they don't have all of it. But if you VSH test them, you can tell if they're only carrying a partial gene set or if they've got it all. If they've got it all, like a lot of our bees are 100% suppressed mite reproduction, so they'll still get mites, but if you go through and measure it, they don't let any of them have babies. It's so weird. So whenever you find a mite, there's no babies with her. Like you'll find a couple mites in a sample even, but no babies. So that's how you tell if they're VSH or not. I figured out, it took me a lot of pain and suffering to figure it out, but how to get solid take on virgin queens. I would hold them in their nukes if I was going to do instrumental insemination. And so I would hold them for a while, inseminate them, and then let them candy release or whatever, and I would come back and find out that they'd killed her, threw her out the front door. And every time I noticed that there were queen cells under there that I didn't look and see. So then I figured out if I would hold them in there until the eggs and young larvae age out and cut those queen cells to where they're hopelessly queenless and they had one option, my take would go through the roof. And so then another aspect of that I figured out later is if you look at in nature, I mean, everything starts off as a virgin. You know what I mean? It's like commercial guys look at virgins like they won't work, but technically everything starts off as a virgin. So where's the breaking point or whatever? What I figured out is if you look at a lot of colonies that are in advanced swarming state, so that's when most of the virgins are coming out, the old queen had quit laying a while back so she could slim down and the swarm could leave. And so I think, and I don't know exact estimates, but a lot of virgin queens that are introduced in the wild or in nature are going into hopelessly queenless colonies because the old queen quit laying a while back. So it makes sense. I found it in a roundabout way, but I think in nature that's how most virgins are introduced. So I had to learn it the hard way, but that gives you a lot better take on virgin queens. They can be a viable option. And they're more profitable for a breeder to produce because they don't have to run mating nukes and stuff. They can just run high quality stock and produce queens, and then the beekeeper can kind of handle the risk of open mating, instead of the breeder taking it on the chin for all of it. So I think in the future people will be more open to it. Dan Purvis told me if I could figure out a way to consistently get virgins to introduce, I'd be a rich man. I don't believe him, but I think there's definitely potential for it.
All right, so we switched to a different hive, and so what are we going to do with this one?
These are colonies that I set up to build queen cells. So basically what I do is I start inspecting big double deep colonies, the ones that are just massive, and as soon as they start making queen cells and they're in the mood to swarm, those are the ones I use for cell building. And a lot of people, which was me in the past, I would just say, I'm going to set up a cell builder, to where I would just slam something together or whatever. Well, they weren't necessarily in the mood, you might say. They weren't trying to make queens yet. So instead of trying to convince them to make queens, I just started using the ones that are already wanting to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to convince them. There's already tons of nectar and pollen coming in. Their population's massive. So what I would do is I use them for 3 weeks. The first week I find them with queen cells. I'll take the queen out, the old queen, and take the queen cells out, which you can cut them out and use them if you want. But remove those, and then I immediately pull a frame of nectar or whatever out, because I'm going to be feeding them anyway to make space for the grafts.
Yeah.
Then I come back the first week and I just take whatever I get, but I go through all the frames and I look for emergency queen cells and then take those out, and then I put the second graft in. Well, then your take's going to go way high because there's nothing to compete with. The only thing they can make queens out of is your grafts.
Yeah.
And then the third week's the same thing. And you can do a fourth week, but all the brood emerges, and if you've got any mites in there whatsoever, there's no other brood. They normally never get in queens, but if you push it 4 weeks, you'll start to get some cells that have a mite in there. I don't like that. You don't want them in there.
Yeah.
So I just do 3 weeks, and then I just split them down and requeen them. But here's our first one here. See what we got. Hopefully they're nice. They weren't last week. So if we run, you'll have to do a take 2, Dawn. All right. You can tell which one's the grafts.
Okay. So what's this top box here?
This is just a hive top feeder. Even if there's a good nectar flow going on, I try to feed them.
Yeah.
Because if you get rain or something for a couple days, then you've got constant nutrition. And I want top quality, well-fed queens.
Okay.
So after I graft, I'll put at least a couple gallons in. And that way they've got plenty to eat. And this time of year, we've got loads of pollen coming in, so I don't really have to supplement that. Some people do, depending on where you're at, you may have to, but I've found it's not really necessary here. Let's see what I do with that brush. It's in my pocket.
So how many cells is here?
I only do 2 bars because you can see it's made for 3.
Yeah.
But if I do 3, it seems like the cells get smaller because the resources are more divided, and I want top quality queens. So I'd rather just set up more builders and do a smaller amount. But you can see, they're pretty good sized queen cells. And they've got a lot of royal jelly in them, so they're well fed. And then we'll take these and put them in the incubator. I think these are about 7 days after I grafted. And so I graft about every Monday or so. So I stay on a weekly schedule. And then every weekend I've got queens emerging. So it makes use of my time off.
And do you know what week this is for this cell builder?
This is the 2nd week. This is the 3rd graft. So last week I went through and cut out all the emergency cells and regrafted. So now I don't have to go through it because there's nothing to compete with it. So after we pull all of them out, we'll regraft and just put it right in, throw syrup in it, and they're good to go. And then after we pull them next week, that's whenever I'll split it down or
Okay.
split it in half and then requeen it.
Yeah. So how would you requeen? Do you give them a cell or do you?
You can do a cell. A lot of times I'll give them a virgin because they're hopelessly queenless anyway.
Yeah.
And so they take virgin queens exceptionally well.
Okay.
But yeah, you can just leave a queen cell too if you'd like, but you know, a lot of times I'll crack it to make sure it's viable. Whereas if it's a virgin queen, I know what she looks
Yeah.
like, how big she is, what color she is, make sure she's got 6 legs, you know, like make sure everything's cool. And we've got a few more of these to pull out, so we'll have several. I'll throw this on, but I'll leave the top off, that way we know which ones to come back to. I probably should have brushed these off more.
So where are these cells going now?
We'll put them, after we pull them all out, we'll take them to the incubator.
Okay.
And I usually put them like in JZBZ shipper bars. And then inside cell protectors, that way if they start to emerge, they can't kill each other.
Yeah.
Like everybody's segregated. And then we usually go through them. Once that we know they're emerging, we'll go through them a few times a day. And you got to transfer them to candy cages really quick or they'll start dying. And then, you know, within a day or so, like on Mondays, we send a lot of them out, next day air. Okay, I think we got most of them.